History ISU by me. William Lyon Mackenzie King's assertion that Canada has too much geography and not enough history is not simply supportable. This is because there are many examples of Canada having a lot of history. Examples are Canada and World War I, Canada earns independence, and Canada, the Great Depression and World War II. Canada and World War I. Canadian soldiers, in any case, performed exceptionally, making heroic contributions on key European fronts, most notably the Battle of Vimy Ridge in France, where more than 3,000 Canadians were killed. Unemployed workers flocked to enlist in 1914 to 15. Recruiting, handled by pre-war militia regiments and by civic organizations, cost the government nothing. By the end of 1914, the target for the Canadian Expeditionary Force was 50,000. By summer 1915, it was 150,000. A battle-hardened Canadian Corps was a major instrument in this war of attrition. Its skill and training were tested on Easter weekend, 1917, when all 4 divisions were sent forward to capture a seemingly impenetrable Vimy Ridge. Weeks of rehearsals, stockpiling, and bombardment paid off. In 5 days, the ridge was taken. Canada and its independence. In 1926, an imperial conference in London, featuring all the colonial prime ministers, declared that Britain and its dominions were in fact equal in status and not master and subject. No longer an empire, it was said that the self-governing white colonies now formed a commonwealth of friendship in which they shared allegiance to a common king, but enjoyed full independence in domestic and foreign policies. In 1931, England put Canada on equal footing with other Commonwealth countries through the Statute of Westminster, which essentially gave its dominions full legal freedom and equal standing with England and one another. It took 5 decades after the Statute of Westminster for Canada to make its final step toward full sovereignty. In 1982, it adopted its own constitution and became a completely independent country, although it's still part of the British Commonwealth, a constitutional monarchy that accepts the British monarch as its own. Canada, Great Depression, and World War II. After a brief economic boom in the 1920s, a severe worldwide economic collapse dubbed the Great Depression hit Canada hard in the 1930s, putting millions out of work and plunging millions into miserable poverty, particularly on the prairie provinces where hardships were compounded by the so-called Dust Bowl drought. Desperate Canadian workers and voters became drawn to revolutionary ideas and wild new political parties. It was a time of radicalism, but the outcomes were not always destructive. Early feminist protests earned Canadian women the right to vote in elections and across the country, and union activists who began exercising the right to strike helped abolish child labor and secure safer factories. Economists still debate whether a specific event, such as the 1929 Wall Street stock market crash, helped spark the Great Depression. However, there is a consensus that the depression was the result of widespread drops in world commodity prices and sudden declines in economic demand and credit. Canada did not have an adequate system of dispensing welfare to the jobless. Although unemployment was a national problem, the federal government refused, for the most part, to provide work for the jobless. This was equally true under conservative Prime Minister R.B. Bennett, as it was under his liberal predecessor and successor, Mackenzie King. Instead, they insisted that caring for the public was a local and provincial responsibility. King, who was prime minister when the Depression started, was reluctant to even acknowledge the economic crisis. This stance led to his defeat at the hands of Bennett in 1930. The national impact of these organizations was minimal, although the Depression did result in an expansion of state responsibility for the economy and social welfare. In 1934, Bennett's government passed the Bank of Canada Act. This established the Bank of Canada in 1935. The bank was charged with regulating monetary policy. Also in 1935, the Canadian Wheat Board was created to market and establish a minimum price for wheat. The Depression also legitimized the economic theories of British economist John Maynard Keynes. He argued that if private investment failed to produce full employment, the state must initiate public investment through deficit spending to create jobs. William Lionel Mackenzie King's assertion that Canada has too much geography and not enough history is not simply supportable. This is because there are many examples of Canada having a lot of history. Examples are Canada in World War I, Canada earns independence, and Canada, the Great Depression, and World War II.